Way back in September 2019, when motor shows were still a thing, I was at the Frankfurt Motor Show. And at the Mercedes stall, I looked at the GLB. It had recently been introduced in the European market at that time. And looking at it, design-wise and the practicality and the 3 rows of seating, my first thought was, well, why doesn't Mercedes launch this in India? Well, it might have taken a few years, but that's what's happened. What you see here is the GLB, the second 3-row SUV from the Mercedes lineup is now in India. But more interestingly, Mercedes has also decided to bring its electric counterpart, the EQB, into India. We're driving them both today in diesel and electric form. We'll tell you all about what the range of the electric EQB is, how the GLB drives, and what it offers to you as a customer. When it comes to design, I think the GLB is quite interesting. It picks up cues from its elder brother, the GLS, and you can see that clearly, especially in profile. You see that kink over the rear door and the rear quarter panel. You see the big wheels, 18 inches here, 19 on the AMG line variant that you see here. You also get a lot of practicality. I think it could have been a slightly more exciting design, but I think it's a pretty solid design that relies on Mercedes's design principles as they're going right now. Of course, on the EQB, the changes between the EQB and the GLB are quite apparent. You get a different grille, you get blue detailing, you get this EQB badge, and also while you see different tail lights on the GLB, the rear of the EQB has a full width tail light, which looks absolutely fantastic. Overall, I think design-wise, it does have the hallmarks of the Mercedes design language, what they're doing today. It's a solid design, it looks quite rugged, but it could have had a few more elements that could make it visually more attractive. How is it to drive and how practical is it? Well, let's get into both and find out. So we've already seen what the GLB looks like on the outside. We've also seen what the EQB looks like. Minor differences between the two because they are, well, literally the same car, with the main difference being that one is powered by ICE engines, the other's EV only. Interior too features a similar theme. If you and I'm saying that on two fronts. One, it's a very Mercedes design. You get into this, you get this lovely metal and leather steering wheel. It looks great. I'm still not a fan of the touch buttons. I think they're a bit too fiddly and they require you to take your eyes off when you're using them. But yeah, it's functional, it works. The paddle shifters on the EQB, so we are driving the EQB first. So I'll tell you all about the EQB, then we'll get into the GLB and I'll give you my verdict on what I think of both the cars. So the paddle shifters on the EQB basically choose the drive regeneration mode, basically how hard the car sort of starts regenerating energy once you take your foot off the throttle. I find the standard mode to be a bit too aggressive, so I'm actually driving it in one of the lighter modes, which allows me to coast very efficiently. Coming back to the interiors, you get these turbine style air vents, you get these toggle switches, everything looks nice. On the EQB, the turbine style air vents are finished in a shade of gold that's also featured on the seats to make the interior stand out that much. I like the metal touches in the interior. This aluminium style insert, brushed aluminium insert looks good. There are two screens that are facing you. One is the 10.25-inch multimedia touch screen. The others, of course, the instrument cluster that's right in front of me. Space-wise, the front seats are actually quite good, both in space and in comfort. The middle row, of course, slides forward and rear, and the third row, surprisingly, is not bad, as Mercedes claims it's for pre-teens and family pets. So make what you will of that, but I can tell you that if you're about 5.5 feet, two people can fit there comfortably. It can be decent even for an hour or two. Anything longer and that might be an issue. The problem will perhaps be, if you're going on long trips, is that with all three rows being used, there's very little boot space available. Of course, with the third row folded, it's a pretty spacious boot. and it would be great for traveling on long drives with your family. The primary concern I have with the third row is actually not about the space, it's about the access to the third row. You can access it from both sides. There's a single lever that you pull and the seat slides forward, both the back and the base of the seat. But the opening space which allows you to get in and out is pretty tight. For an adult, it'll be a bit of a sort of a contortion. You'll have to twist yourself in. For a child, it should not be that much of a problem. So that's one of the practical aspects where the EQB does have an issue. Now coming to the interiors we've spoken about, the exteriors we've spoken about. Coming to the actual performance, this is powered by a battery that has about 66 odd kilowatt hours of usable power. It has 225 bhp, it has 390 Nm of torque. Now, if you've been following its competitors, the XC40 Recharge, for instance, you would think only 390, the XC40's got 660. But to be very honest, 390 feels more than enough. You get full torque from the word go. It's pretty quick. Okay, it might not be pushing your eyeballs back into their sockets or pushing your backs right against the seat, but it's fast enough. I don't think there's a need for everyday performance that's more than this. The claimed range of the car is over 400 kilometers. What I think is more practical is about 350-360 kilometers, because since morning we've had a very easy drive. We were coming down from Kodaikanal, which means I needed very little power. We were mostly coasting. The sort of the momentum that we'd built up kept bringing us down, and the range went up. When we started, the range was about 380 and it went up to about 420. But as I can see now, we've covered 110 kilometers. We've used a quarter of the range, and I think about 350 to 370 kilometers in a single charge should be very, very reasonably easy with the use of air conditioning and other ancillaries, of course. Charging wise, the battery is capable, or the system is capable of being charged by up to a 100 kilowatt hour charger. On a 100 kilowatt hour charger, going from 10 to 80% will only take you 32 minutes. And realistically, going from 10 to 100% on an 11 kilowatt charger, which is what you usually find, is around the 6.5 hour mark. So if you have an 11 kilowatt charger at home, you can leave it plugged in and overnight it will be fully charged. And I think 350-370 kilometers is sizable. Now, how is it to drive? Like I said, it doesn't have a massive push, but it's quick enough. It's responsive, and what really impresses me are two things. One, the ride quality of the car is pretty good. Two, you really don't feel the weight. So that's been one of my big problems with electric vehicles, that you really feel the weight of that heavy, big battery. But even with a 66.5 kilowatt hour battery, you can throw the EQB around on the twisties coming back from Kodaikanal. It was really good to drive. The steering is direct, has a decent amount of feel. The brakes are progressive, you don't have an issue there. The ride is quite good. Of course, high-speed stability is not a problem. It's a Mercedes after all. The ride only issue could be that when you hit minor imperfections, small potholes and stuff, you can feel that the suspension's stiff to handle the extra weight, and that the car does have a decent amount of weight to it. But surprisingly, the Mercedes engineers have tuned this to a level where it doesn't feel obese like a lot of other EVs feel, and it drives very balanced, and the acceleration is more than enough. The instant push is more than enough for everyday use, and it's pretty quick. Top speed is of course limited to 160 kilometers per hour, which should be more than enough for most people. It's way above the speed limit in our country anyway. And with the range being what I already said, I think the EQB then offers a really balanced package. It's spacious, it's practical, the range is practical, and it's pretty good to drive. I mean, you can definitely tell that the Mercedes engineers have made massive progress since they first launched the EQC, because the EQB drives better, offers better range, and I think overall feels a better package at what should be hopefully a much lower cost than the EQC. Of course, both the GLB and EQB will be CBU only, so they won't be cheap, but I think Mercedes is going to price them quite well because they have a lot of potential for the Indian market. Next, let's get into the GLB that we are driving today and see what the ICE equivalent of the EQB drives like. So after the EQB, we are now in the GLB. Now the GLB will be offered in multiple variants. There'll be a two-wheel drive diesel variant, there'll be a two-wheel drive petrol variant, but what we are driving is the top of the line all-wheel drive 4MATIC 220d. The two-wheel drive variants will come in what Mercedes calls the progressive line trim, and this is the AMG line trim. The difference is it gets different wheels, different grille, other visual changes inside the cabin. It's really nice. You've got these black Alcantara style seats with this lovely red detailing that I love. This is something that AMG does very well. You also get the turbine vents now finished in this matte aluminum kind of finish. And again, this ties in nicely with the other matte surfaces. They contrast very nicely with the black surfaces of the interior, and this shiny carbon fiber finish on the dashboard and on the door pads. This also looks good. The seats are quite firm, but they're nice and comfortable. They hold you in place very well. Now, I've already told you about the interior space of the EQB. The GLB is hardly any different, so the same things apply. Spacious 3 rows of seating, but getting into the third row is a bit of a bother, especially if you're an adult. Of course, again, like I said, if you're using 3 rows, there's virtually no boot space. If you're not using the third row, there's a lot of boot space. So that's as far as practicality is concerned. This is a 2-liter diesel unit which produces 188 bhp, 400 Nm of torque. In the all-wheel drive version, of course, with the added traction, you do 0 to 100 in 7.6 seconds. Now, on its own, the GLB 220d is actually quite fun to drive. It's a powerful engine. The gearbox shifts brilliantly. It's intuitive, whether it's shifting up, whether it's shifting down when you're braking to be in the right gear. It's so intuitive, it's fantastic. I don't think you even need pedals. In comfort, it's a little bit laid back, but still very, very good. So that's something good to see, that they're finally getting the tuning of their gearbox with their engine absolutely near perfection. So that's obviously nice. The engine itself is very tractable. It's fast. The 400 Nm of torque really helps, and that makes a big difference. Getting to silly 3-digit speeds is very easy. At the same time, if you're light on the throttle, getting quite good efficiency numbers, lower running cost, is also something that the engine does very well. The only thing I would think is that, at least in the AMG version that we're driving with the 19-inch wheels, it feels a bit stiffly sprung. So on really broken roads, you'll have to be a bit careful. Everywhere else, it's nice, it's sporty. The high-speed stability, once again, is fantastic. Now, coming to the obvious point where this would be a comparison for most customers, how does the GLB in the ICE form feel versus the EQB? Well, your first reaction is, well, there's a lot of noise because, of course, in the EQB, one of the bigger advantages is that there's no engine noise. So the cabin is so much more silent. So, and you know, this is more apparent when you come from the EQB to the GLB. It's not the other way around. Because when you spend 4 hours in the EQB with virtually no noise from the drivetrain, and suddenly you get into the GLB and you're like, oh, this is something unique. But if you're used to usual ICE cars, I don't think that'll be an issue for you. So yes, the EQB feels definitely a lot more quieter, and of course, instant torque helps. In this 2-liter, despite it having 400 Nm, you do have to wait for the turbo to spool up. On the other hand, the handling of the GLB feels slightly better. It of course is lighter, so it feels lighter on its feet. But yeah, I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison, to be honest. The EQB is aimed at a very different customer, and the GLB is aimed at a very different customer. Now, we don't know the prices of both these cars yet. They're both CBUs, so do expect them to be priced at a premium from whatever the competitors are. If Mercedes manages to price them near or at par, I'd be surprised. But yeah, that would be very, very impressive. But it is possible. And what do I think of the product overall? Well, you know, it offers a unique package. The XC40 Recharge and the EV6, for that instance, they have their own qualities, but none of them have the practicality of being a 7-seater, a usable 7-seater. And at the same time, the EQB has acceptable range, 350 to 370 kilometers for most people. That should be good enough in most use cases. And the GLB, I think, feels much nicer to drive than, let's say, a GLA. It definitely feels like an upgrade. Even in the design, okay, I might think it lacks a few adventurous touches, but the overall proportions are nice. It has a good amount of road presence, and just the driving appeal, the interior. Yes, there are a few bits, some of the plastic bits could be better, but otherwise, the GLB and EQB feel very, very, very competent products. This is a small SUV with 3 rows of seating. There's, of course, the Mercedes badge, and depending on the price, this could open up a new niche segment for the Indian customer where they can get a SUV in a manageable size that you can take anywhere. You can still seat your whole family. You can even have it in a good electric form, in an electric variant, which feels quite nice to drive, which feels cutting edge. So yes, a very strong product from Mercedes, depending on the price, which is going to be announced on the 2nd of December. It could be a surprise hit for Mercedes, and it's certainly something that will bring more attention to the brand, more customer interaction for the brand, and I think it can only build on the success of Mercedes.